Hi, I'm the other Kevin Kelly. You know, the fact that there were two Kevin Kellys made me look into the derivation of names, because I've always liked the name Kevin Kelly. I thought it was a very mellifluous name. I looked up Kevin Kelly, and Kevin, of course, my parents got it reversed. Kevin means born handsome and kind, and that should have been my brother. But Kelly means warrior. And that's something, actually, I have had to be. And I have a great posse with me. Some of them are here in this room. They are my cohorts, they are my consultants, and they are my colleagues. And together, we have really, I think, sort of mounted a campaign to change an extremely stodgy culture that is a very different kind of work, I think, probably than what a lot of people in this room do. I'm the other Kevin Kelly, as I said. I'm also the only person in the room, I think, with a tie on. You can blame Catholic school my whole life, including even Catholic University, and the fact that I'm a federal worker. We feel naked without ties on. So here's what our ranch, as I say, the 352 million square feet. And the reason I said, meanwhile, back at the ranch, for those of you who were not maybe American and looked at Saturday morning cowboy and Indian shows, there was always something very important happening back at the ranch while the sheriff was out looking for the bad guys, because it was mobile. The ranch, the physical place, was still extremely important. And you see, this is the sort of kind of metrics on that ranch. But this is our mission, you know, to provide superior workplace and superior value. How do we do it? Well, in the 1980s, it was all butts and seats. It was just as many places to put people as possible. It was a one-size-fits-all Mao suit kind of workstation that looked like that. And you just sort of abandon hope, oh ye who enter here. Then, of course, it ended, it gave us organizations and workplaces where either the pants were way too short or they were too big, nothing fit, it looked sloppy, people felt unprofessional, and it just didn't work. In 2011, because of the consultants that we've worked with, we've really developed a technology, using technology, but a technology where we can really, at a cost-effective way, tailor the suit of the public space to the organization. And we can make workplaces that fit all of these different parts that we need to in order to develop a superior workplace. I mean, do we want one that looks like this, which was recently finished in DC, or do we want the old abandoned hope kind of workstation? It's interesting, when I showed this slide to government workers, there's this gasp of recognition and horror that this is where they're spending their lives. And it's basically, this is a new pilot project that we've done at our central office, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a second. But things are changing, and our ranch is shrinking. And one of the reasons it's shrinking is this woman here, who I have the greatest respect for, even though she's my boss. Don't tell her I said that. But she is really an interesting force in workplace today. First of all, this was what she wrote the first day that she was on the job on our government website. I almost fell off my chair, because we have been talking about this since like 2001, 2002. And then finally, there's somebody in the top seat who really, really gets it. Not only that, she is interested in consolidating, for instance, in DC, the 3 major GSA locations into one location, which is basically tripling the density of that building. And she does say that this is a challenge. She goes that the the 1800F challenge. So it's an experiment. Will it work or won't it? Is it too ambitious or won't it? But I am fascinated that the government is afraid of being too ambitious and too aggressive with mobility rather than being less. The other person, of course, that makes a huge difference is President Obama, because he has told us, you need to give us back $3 billion in real estate. We need to save $3 billion in unused federal real estate. So this has led to a tremendous interest in mobility. And we've actually done some great, I think, research work about mobility. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our view of mobility, and then I'm going to go back to the ranch. So these are the two sort of big things that are happening, the environmental plus the workplace demographics and technology. We are by law required, probably more than a lot of people, to really, really look at the environmental impact of our workplaces. Here's what I thought was very interesting in this report. This is, and we're hearing a lot of that this afternoon, that people who are mobile, I'm very mobile. I don't ever have to go to the office. I can tell you I am so much more productive now than I used to be. But that personal feeling is corroborated by workers who feel that they are much more productive in their mobile situation, and their supervisors. That's what's really interesting. Because the old school people would say, oh, well, of course they're going to say they're more productive. Yeah, but so do their supervisors. That's what's really interesting. That also, you know, in terms of what we were just talking about, the happiness quotient. It's a big uptick in the happiness quotient when people are, first of all, are treated like adults, that you're going to get your work done. I don't have to be, again, using the Catholic school analogy, I don't have to be Sister Marie Therese, you know, up there saying, when are you going to get your homework done? No, we're adults, we have work to do, judge us on our work, not on our attendance. And one of the more interesting things that came out of this, and I know it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see the big picture here of this report, was the effect on the carbon of three different scenarios of mobility. One was this top one, which is sort of what the government does now, which is one day every 2 weeks, I think it is, I can stay at home and work. But that has an extremely small effect on mobility, and I would say it probably has a very small effect on the happiness quotient. When it starts to get a little bit more interesting when 20% of the people might be non-mobile, but 80% of the people are mobile 2 days a week. Then you're starting to really get something. And then, of course, when you're extremely aggressive and, you know, 95% of people are mobile 3 days a week. You know, I would be in that category in terms of my working agenda, as it were. Here's what those sorts of things look like. I mean, if you're going to see what they actually look like, that's actually me up there in my home office. Luckily, I have a much more beautiful office. I'm in a 1911 or 17 building, but that's an example. It's just a regular office that I can go to when I want to. And it's basically a touchdown kind of situation. And the other is this, but you know, a much more normal looking office. And then, of course, the touchdown kind of feeling here. Now, this has a minimal effect on carbon footprint. This means greater density. We're going to have to increase the density, and it means, and we'll get to this later, that, and I'm going to come back to this idea that offices, and we've heard it so much today, it's like an idea that's really current, is that workplaces are like cities. And the problem with many of the workplaces today is that they're like Houston. They have no zoning. So people are, one person's over here talking, this person's trying to do math, this person is talking about the football game. You know, we just have to begin to start thinking a little bit more sensibly about the workplace, because really, in many ways, I was trained as an urban designer, but then I found out that nobody actually does urban design anymore, so at least in my generation, they totally forgot about that. So workplaces really are, they're cities with roofs on them. That's what they are. And it's a tremendous opportunity for an urban, a has-been urban designer like myself. So we need to introduce zoning. This depends very much on the type of work. One thing that happens in the government is once there's an idea that's current, like mobility, it's like, let's all go mobile. You know, well, sorry, but it doesn't work that way. I mean, I hope the woman who is, because I know her, who is filling out my paycheck isn't mobile. I hope she's sitting there doing whatever she has to do with it. This will change over time. But for the present time, there's a large part of the federal government that is sedentary and must remain so for this foreseeable future. It's that type of, when I say rational mobility, figuring out who can more easily become mobile than others, that I think we have really, I think have something to share with you. This is something that DEGW did, which I love. I don't know what the company was, but they just showed a map. They totaled up all of the commuting that people were doing, and it was like going from Minneapolis to New Orleans every day. Those type of visuals really make an effect on people. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, so we, this was actually, so I was 14 years in the private sector. You know, everything was, you know, there was white walls and, you know, all that architecture-y stuff. We all had black, you know, turtlenecks, there you go. Word recall becomes difficult when you just turn 60. Black turtlenecks, you know, we were very architectural, and this is what I was expected to move into. I had a dark night of the soul, let me tell you, before when I saw that. And this is before we talk about Generation X and Generation Y and stuff. This is the crap I'm supposed to work in. Myself, an architect, born handsome and kind. In this case. So, you know, huge problem there. Although, I'll tell you something, this was a better place to work in than the place that followed it. Because the place that followed it was a bunch of, was a rabbit warren of cubes that we couldn't see over, and there were no windows, etc. This, at least, you know, we had fun with it. We made it a huge joke because we were all architects in there. We had an employee of the week sign and stuff like that because it was such a degraded environment. However, I digress. The president has said that this type of stuff, where there's a tremendous amount of waste involved, where people are not utilizing the space, this needs to be returned. We need to start consolidating, getting out of leases, etc. It's part of the whole transition of real estate. Again, you know, the office today reminds me very much of that sort of blighted urban environment. And it has that sort of debilitating effect. You know, when you walk into a bunch of cubicles and there's nobody there, you know, if I want to be lonely, I can be lonely at home, and I don't have to do this huge commute. You think you had it bad with 45? This is an agency which actually is FEMA. So they are out in the field. They are out in the field helping people as they should be. But why do they have 8 by 10 cubicles? 8 by 10, and this is the amount of utilization. It's absurd, absolutely absurd, and it's got to change. You can see why I'm a warrior. So, why is this happening? We have this horrible, horrible utilization. By the way, this is the worst I've ever seen. Most of the government ones are similar to the 45, etc. It's not that much different than the private sector, but this is the worst I've ever seen. I love this chart from Arthur Levy and Murnane, who I think are all education gurus from MIT or something. And they basically tracked work over between 1960 and 2000. What they found out was that non-routine cognitive work, like thinking and I don't know what's going to happen today, I'm going to deal with stuff, that has risen tremendously, whereas the routine stuff, like I'm going to fill out my timesheet today and do my expense reports, those type of things have gone way down. And yet, we are providing the kind of environment that's perfect for this, but stinks for that. Actually, what you might think of is that even though it looks like that, it actually is this. Yes, I've discovered Photoshop. I tell you, knowing Photoshop as a government employee makes you absolutely the dictator of the world. So I have this. I had this boss. He was the head architect, or the chief architect of GSA, Edward Feiner, a brilliant man. Anyway, he wrote this thing recently. I don't know if you can all see it, but basically what he's saying is, well, first of all, how many of you in this room have been on a diet? And you don't have to raise your hand. I just thought that might be a bad idea. But I have recently been on a diet. And the reason I've been on a diet is not because I want to look gorgeous, but because I have horrible arthritis. And every pound extra that I have equals pain. So I thought, well, you know, we're on a diet now in the government. And every pound extra is a pound of pain. Every pound I lose, I see a difference that my knee hurts less. So this was a great analogy, I thought, of his, because he was around during the last government slowdown of space, or diet, as I call it. And what they did is they said, across the board, 20%, everybody gets 20% less. The problem was that you ended up with a very, very emaciated patient, if you will. Because those of you who have been on a diet know that you can't target the weight. You know, you may want to get at this, but unfortunately it's your lean muscle that might go if you go on a diet that makes no sense, like the cookie diet or something like that. Yes, you will, please don't sue me, cookie diet people. But if you want to go to the class reunion and look great, yes, the cookie diet might work. It's temporary. What you want is a healthy diet of reduction, and that's what we're aiming at. So how do we do that? How do we get so fat in the government? Well, one of the ways we got so fat is we have these titles. My favorite is the administrative assistant to the assistant secretary. And you know, when you have a title like that, you just need 300 square feet per person. So, so what we're trying to do is to take those titles and say, the title doesn't matter, it's the type of work that you're doing. And basically, that's what we're trying to do, that so that we go on a space diet. How do we get this way? Well, one of the reasons is this has become a big standard in the government, 8 by 10. That is a legal bedroom in all 50 states. If you want to put people to sleep, put them in an 8 by 10. And that's a teenager's bedroom, and this is somebody's workspace. So here's what happens when you go on a crash diet in the government. You have to deal with the unions. So, of course, we keep that great big fat private space, the workstations. And we get rid of all these other things. We have bad connectivity, we have no focus rooms, we have lousy acoustics, but we keep the great big workstations, the throne rooms that are, on average, 77% of the time, a private office is vacant, according to Herman Miller. 77% of the time. Or the great big fat workstations that are poorly utilized. So we can either go on, as I said, the cookie diet. What we want to put you on, federal government, that's Jack LaLanne, by the way, at 90. We want to be that Jack LaLanne kind of space in the future. How do we do that? So we have I actually go to Weight Watchers. We have our weigh-in. So we get to know how it is we're eating, et cetera, et cetera. So we go for an information thing. This is what we do. In the government, we have a survey that we get the results, the data is stored, and we get the results. And these typically go to, if we're going to do a large engagement, these will go to our consultants. So we basically are looking for two things. We want to assess the mobility level at the desk, and we want to assess the interaction level at the desk. And that will give us that will categorize the predominant work pattern of the group. And the, DEGW helped us, but it was vetted by all of our other consultants with coming up with work neighborhoods for each of these different kinds of work patterns. And what makes a work neighborhood is not, in the past we used the workstation as the unit of measurement, if you will, which is a very sort of, if you will, suburban way of looking at space. My house, my lawn. That seems to that's all that matters. Whereas a more sort of urban way of looking at it would be a neighborhood way. How many conference rooms serves this kind of work? How many focus rooms do we need for this kind of work? And basically, we could take all of those governmental titles and we could boil them down into these 6 basic patterns of work. So, you know, we have people, obviously, if you look at these tasks, they're very different. And so why should they all have the same workstation? And I know I'm sort of preaching to the choir there. You know, this person is like me, easy, low-hanging fruit for mobility. There's no reason this person who is, you know, externally mobile, and when they come to the office, they're in a conference room, they don't need an 8x10 desk. These people who are mobile, but they're mobile within the building, those people are usually managers, directors, people like that. They're probably the least likely bunch to be mobile. These people, it depends. You know, if you're a lawyer and you're doing heads down work, maybe you can do it better at home. But we need to be able to triage this in some sort of almost scientific way. Let me just show you, I don't know if this will work or not. How do I, well, these are animations that will fly you through each of these different neighborhoods. Now we did this because we felt it was so important to train our people who are dealing with clients to make them, it's sort of that HGTV kind of thing, you know, it sort of turned everybody into a little bit of an amateur interior decorator, but at least they know what laminate is now, etc. This way we can begin to teach them about some of these concepts of the workplace. And so I'm telling you, the workspace library is absolutely killer. It is fantastic. And I promise to get everybody a link to it. I'll get back to that later. We even give you a shopping list for each of those. So find out whether you're one of those 3, how interactive or concentrative you are, and then, you know, whether you're on the phone, in person, etc. And there's your shopping list. Through each of the different work patterns, we tell you what you need. And it's great. So this shows a very typical office building. Actually, it is a real place. It's in Chicago. And it has all 6 of those work patterns arranged on it. And you can do that because it is modular and can move back and forth. Finally, we know that this system works because we've tested it. And we have, you know, the light gray is new and the old is their old where they were before. But what's really interesting is the 2 things that are really still pretty bad are noise. What I mentioned before, the lack of zoning, etc. So what we have done is these work patterns also begin to talk to a certain kind of zoning, so that the red are more noisy things, and the blue is less noisy. So I'm going to skip through these because I'm getting to 5 minutes, and I want to show you some of our... È finito. Okay, so then I'm going to go really quick through small, medium, and large. Okay, a typical government office building, our central office building. You know, we had a commissioner who had a throne room, 24 by 38. He said, "I hate this," and he turned it into a war room. It was like this, you know, everything, little cubicles, and basically what we proposed is something more in that line. But this is the war room, and here's the thing, leading by example. We have a small office tool where we can do this all remotely from far away. We have this pilot that we did at our national office. This is what people thought they were going to get because they were going from 171 to 83 during our engagement. This is what they said they thought they were going to get. They got a 35.5 in their typical space that they were currently in on their scorecard, and this is what they actually got, which was a 93.5 on the GSA scorecard, which I'll be more than happy to share with you. But it didn't look like a washing machine or something like that. Finally, and this is the last, the Department of Homeland Security that Gensler is doing with us. This is just such a fabulous project. I wish I could share more with you. Maybe in another venue I will, but it started with a pilot project where we went from 270 to 106 square feet per person because we realized, Gensler helped them realize how mobile they could be. That saved them $900,000 a year in rent. And this is for 170 people. Just think of the amount of money that's possible to save. We're working with all of the parts of the Department of Homeland Security, assessing their mobility, etc. And, okay. Not time for this. But what keeps me up at night, and what keeps me being a warrior, is that culturally we Americans are very into individuality, that we don't like to be told there's a grand plan for things. I think that's fine. Craig Knight's PhD showed very nicely that when you allow people to change and rearrange certain aspects of their workspace, productivity greatly increases. But can we keep up a unified sort of urban outlook in the midst of a very individualistic outlook of we Americans? It's a big question. But I'll end by just telling you that my middle name is Vincent, and Vincent means conquering. So with my consultants,